Whenever you're ready, sir. Okay. A very good afternoon to all of you. Appreciate your presence here. Those of you joining here with us in Rome. I know some of you have come all the way from New Delhi for the Prime Minister's visit. And of course, to all colleagues who are joining from India through our live stream on the internet. This is a very important visit. As you know, Prime Minister is in Rome to attend the G20 that begins tomorrow. Of course, a summit involves a lot of pre-summit activities, and we are particularly honored and privileged, sir, that Honorable Commerce and Industry Minister Shri Piyush Goyal, who's actually in this capacity the Sherpa of the G20 process. It's a very unique role that he plays in this and has been closely involved with the entire pre-summit as well as the summit declarations. We have the honor of having him here with us to give us a sense of where we are as the summit commences tomorrow. And then perhaps after his opening remarks, sir, we'll take a few questions depending on the time. Without further ado, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Namaste. I'm delighted to share with you some of the updates of the progress we have made while discussing the various elements of the leaders' declaration that will come out of the meeting of the leaders of the G20 nations on 30th and 31st of October. We were delighted to welcome Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi in Rome this morning. He will be here for a series of bilateral exchanges to call on and meet His Holiness the Pope at the Vatican and then participate at the G20 summit tomorrow and day after. This is my first in-person interaction with all the G20 Sherpas of various countries. And I believe the various bilateral meetings, engagements, and the dialogue that we have had over the last 3 days to finalize the outcomes of the G20 summit have truly been very, very invigorating, very much in the interest of India, India's trade, India's long-term growth towards prosperity, and very much aligned with the theme of the G20 in Rome, people, planet, and prosperity. The G20, as we are all aware, has emerged as the premium global forum for international cooperation. I call it the premier global forum because it represents nearly 80% of global GDP, 75% of global trade, and nearly 2/3 of the world population. The agenda of the just concluded meeting so far has included significant interventions by India, and some of the main issues on which India has focused and made very meaningful interventions through the last 3 days are as follows. One, on health, I am very happy to share with you that broadly the G20 nations have endorsed India's position that extensive COVID-19 immunization is a global public good. I'm also happy to share with you that we got tremendous support from the G20 nations for our suggestion on mutual recognition of travel documents, including testing and vaccine certificates. Two, on sustainable development and food security, India insisted that the policies must protect the interest of small and marginal farmers, conserve local food cultures, which in turn will be very important for our food security. Third, on climate change and environment, India has spoken very strongly on the need for critical enablers for galvanizing global climate action, which includes commensurate long-term concessional climate finance, access to affordable and sustainable technology, and commitment to adopt sustainable lifestyles and responsible and consumption patterns which are suited to eliminating waste, something which was highlighted in the Sustainable Development Goal 12. And by and large, the developed countries are in agreement with India. The discussions on this are still ongoing. On economic recovery, item 4, as co-chairs of the G20 Framework Working Group, India is ensuring that there is no premature withdrawal of support and the most vulnerable sections are provided necessary support. The G20 has agreed to extend the debt service suspension initiative till the end of 2021, thereby giving some breathing space to those in need and vulnerable around the world. Fifth, on tax reforms, India has pushed the G20 nations to address the mismatch between source of generation of profits and the jurisdiction where profits are taxed. This will ensure that large multinational corporations pay a minimum effective corporate tax in the country of operation. Sixth, on anti-corruption, where India is the G20 co-chair of the Anti-Corruption Working Group this year, we have contributed towards the 5 think pieces related to asset recovery, information sharing, law enforcement cooperation, technology and denial of safe haven. 7, on women's empowerment, education and employment, India supports the G20's emphasis on women's empowerment. We strongly advocated for the inclusion of language against gender-based violence and supported the new policy framework of G20 on remote working arrangements. 8, on tourism and culture, India highlighted the importance of recovery of the tourism sector, especially given the impact of COVID-19 on this sector. We welcome the G20 focus on creative economy and preserving cultural heritage. 9, on the digital economy, the G20's endorsement of using data for development is under consideration. India has strongly pushed for the need for balancing, along with data free flow with trust, a narrative for cross-border data flows and accommodating development imperatives of the developing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, India's voice in the G20 represents the voice of all less developed countries and developing nations. We speak for the low and middle income countries. It was following Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi's suggestion to the Saudi leadership in 2020 that the G20 convened an extraordinary summit on the COVID-19 situation last year. This year, Italy convened a special summit to leverage the G20's influence in addressing the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. India actively participated, and the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi played an important role in building the world's efforts towards a more inclusive government in Afghanistan. The G20 also focused on the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, especially the rights of women, children, minorities, and vulnerable people in Afghanistan, according to the principles enshrined in the UN Charter and other relevant international instruments. Friends, India is going to take on the G20 presidency on 1st December 2022 and will be the president and take the chairship of G20 for the year 2023. We will enter the Troika on 1st December 2021 and will play a leadership role on the issues and concerns of the developing countries and emerging market economies in the G20 forum under the leadership and guidance of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. Our efforts in building more consensus and building back the support of all the developed nations towards resilient supply chains and faster recovery of vulnerable economies of low-income and developing countries has been widely appreciated by other G20 members, and we shall continue to represent the voice of the low and middle income countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that comprehensive approach. We'll take a few questions now. Okay, just hold on, I'll start off with. Please introduce yourself and the news outlet from which you're asking.
Hi, sir. I'm Siddhant from Beyond. My question is on the COVID vaccine. You said that mutual recognition of vaccines has been proposed when it comes to G20 grouping. How many countries in the G20 grouping have supported India? And specifically on Afghanistan, what is India's plan when it comes to the grouping? The Prime Minister has been giving proposals. Can we expect a proposal from the Prime Minister specifically on Afghanistan?
Well, as regards the support on COVID vaccines being mutually recognized, by and large there's broad consensus because all the nations wish to restart travel, restart economic activity and bring back normalcy. The pace at which vaccination is increasing, the huge role that India is playing, both in the vaccination plan in India and the role that we are playing and we propose to play in the coming months and years to help the world vaccinate, has been very, very widely welcomed by almost all the G20 nations, and we are working towards an acceptable language to bring that within the G20 framework. Maybe you'd like to address the other question on.
As I said, I think on this one, sir, I think we'll wait for, without prejudging what the Prime Minister would do, and I think anyway, let's focus on the G20, which Sir has said, and we'll come back to this in further briefing. Pranay, please.
Sir, Pranay Upadhyay, ABP News से आपने कहा कि जो इंडिया का स्टैंड था उस पे सपोर्ट मिला है. जो ट्रिप्स वेवर की बात थी, क्या उस बारे में भी कोई बात हुई है जो इंडिया का इनिशिएटिव था? और एक चीज सवाल और था सर मेरा कि इकोनॉमिक रिकवरी के लिए टेररिज्म एक इंपॉर्टेंट इशू है जिसको भारत उठाता रहा है. क्या उस एस्पेक्ट पर भी G20 के डिक्लेरेशन के अंदर कोई एस्पेक्ट चर्चा में आया हो? क्या हम एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं?
बहुत अच्छी बात है आपने पूछी. जहां तक ट्रिप्स वेवर का सवाल है, इसके बारे में साउथ अफ्रीका और भारत ने कुछ प्रपोजल्स विश्व के समक्ष रखे हैं. उसके संबंध में अधिकांश देशों ने समर्थन भी दिया है. कुछ देशों ने कुछ ऑल्टरनेटिव प्रपोजल्स, कोई नए ढंग से उसी ऑब्जेक्टिव को मीट करने की बात की है कि जहां तक वैक्सीन की अवेलेबिलिटी बढ़े, वैक्सीन सबके लिए उपलब्ध हो, उसके लिए कुछ और तरीकों से ये उपलब्ध कराए जाएं, उसकी कुछ देशों ने बात की है जिसकी चर्चा WTO में हो रही है. और साउथ अफ्रीका के जो वाणिज्य मंत्री हैं और मेरे बीच कल रात को भी लगभग 1 घंटा इस विषय में वीडियो कॉन्फ्रेंसिंग पे चर्चा हुई है. हम दोनों देश पूरे विश्व के डेवलपिंग वर्ल्ड को और कई विकसित देश को भी रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं जिन्होंने इसमें हमें समर्थन दिया है, और हमारी लगातार चर्चा WTO फ्रेमवर्क पे इस पे चल रही है. और G20 में भी हमने इस विषय को रखा है और इस विषय पे कुछ सवाल कुछ देशों के हैं जिसको हम उचित स्तर पर एड्रेस कर रहे हैं. टेररिज्म, आतंकवाद के खिलाफ तो मुझे लगता है पूरा विश्व एक आवाज में एकजुट होकर बोलता है. आपको शायद ध्यान होगा, माननीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने आतंकवाद और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर जो आतंकवाद की लड़ाई है, इसमें सभी G20 देशों को सम्मिलित करने की बात कुछ वर्ष पहले रखी थी, उस बात को सभी देशों ने स्वीकार किया था और तब से लगातार आतंकवाद के ऊपर जो प्रहार है उसमें सभी देश भारत के साथ कंधे से कंधा लगा के खड़े हैं.
Before taking the next question, since there are some people who speak Hindi, just for a quick translation of that, summary rather. The question on TRIPS, Honorable Minister mentioned that almost everyone is supportive of the idea. Some have presented alternative proposals to achieve the same objective of making sure the vaccines reach everybody and they're affordable and accessible, and discussions are underway. As regards the issue of terrorism, I think the world speaks with one voice across the world that this is against terrorism. And Prime Minister himself had spoken about this in G20, and all have accepted this. And this is, of course, discussions on TRIPS are a WTO issue, and that's where the discussion would happen more than here. So we'll take the next question. Before I come. You need to. Please.
My question is on, India is co-chair of the working group on corruption. In the previous editions of the G20, we have raised the issue of economic defaulters. Economic refugees, if you want to bring them back. Was there any discussion on that? Will there be some progress on this? And number two, sir, very related, which is this, that to give a sense of one or two things which will be India's singular contribution to this edition of the G20 summit. Thank you.
Manishji, as far as the issue about defaulters and economic defaulters is concerned, I think India has been a strong proponent of global action in this regard. There are laws of land of different countries which have to be respected, but we are trying to build up a coalition, and that is the role India played as co-chair of the working group also, to try and bring a broader consensus for faster action on economic defaulters looking for safe haven. In terms of our specific contribution, I think the various issues that I highlighted, the 9 points on the agenda that I just spoke about, were all only those issues where India played a very significant role in terms of flagging off the issue and in terms of trying to build consensus around the table and get them incorporated in the text, whether it's bringing health to the forefront in terms of acceptance of vaccines, mutual recognition of documents, where it was earlier proposed only as a travel issue. India, along with some other like-minded countries, was able to push it into the health paragraphs so that it takes a more important center stage when it comes to handling the current pandemic and possibly future pandemics. And similarly, for example, on food security, sustainable development, on several parts of climate change and environment, where the SDG 12 was brought into the discussion and brought onto the table, so that responsible lifestyles and eliminating wasteful consumption can also find traction amongst the nations, is clearly something India batted for very strongly. We have been in the finance track playing an important role in ensuring a longer period before the rollback or withdrawal of support starts, so that vulnerable sections are given a longer period to recover. On tax reforms, I think many of you are aware, India was one of the most important voices, and Prime Minister Modi over the years has been consistently focusing on a minimum global tax, so that people who find safe haven and avoid paying tax in any jurisdiction also come within the ambit of taxation. On women's empowerment, while it was an issue which obviously had very, very broad consensus, India also helped in preparing the language and the framework which was acceptable to all sections. So there were certain divergent views, but we helped coalesce all of them to bring in acceptable language. Similarly, on our food cultures, on food security, on several issues, we have been able to bring to the fore the world's attention. Thank you.
Ilya.
Hello, I'm Ilya Rahipa from Bloomberg News. spoke today with your colleague from Russia, with the Russian Sherpa. She also said that she sees hope for some decisions at G20 summit to be made on the vaccine certificates recognition. But would you be able to tell a little bit more in details exactly what your hope is, whether it will be included in the communique, because according to the draft we've seen, there was nothing about the mutual recognition of the vaccine certification as of yesterday. So maybe by Sunday we'll see something concrete in the written form. So will be this, first, will be this about mutual recognition of the vaccine certification, which seems a bit easier than just to recognize each other's vaccines in order to, or it will be even a step further to recognize each other's vaccines, not just certificates?
Well, I think there are both aspects, the recognition of the vaccine and the recognition of the certificate. But we also very much are focusing to see how we can help build the capacity for faster approvals, or let's say for larger number of vaccines to be approved, because we are seeing a number of vaccines developed in different parts of the world. So we are looking at strengthening the processes so that more vaccines, if found appropriate within the scientific framework, get approval. But in terms of recognition of vaccines and their certifications, we all also recognize what nations would have as public policy and their own requirements of transparency, efficacy, or public health and safety.
We'll see in the declaration anything on that.
We are quite confident that there is broad consensus, and the language is being worked out on how we can bring it in, to bring in the sense and bring confidence to the world that we are all committed to faster recovery, resilient recovery, yet at the same time ensuring that there's sufficient policy space for nations to protect their own national interests.
Thank you.
May I ask just one more question, if it's possible?
Okay, it's the last one then. You already third question.
On coal, you know that coal is a big also discussing point at G20 summit here. How much money India needs to start its transition from coal? If we talk about funding.
Probably a discussion.
India has been one of the most responsible nations worldwide in terms of meeting our intended nationally determined contributions, INDCs, which were made at and post Paris. India was the leader who brought several developing and less developed countries on the table in Paris to make Paris successful. We are one of the few G20 countries now officially recognized by this agreement. We have done all of this despite the fact that several other nations who had made commitments on finance, commitments on technology, have yet to fulfill their commitments. There's been significant discussion on this subject at the around the table at the Sherpa track, and the discussions are ongoing on how to reflect the collective effort and the need for all nations to meet their targets, for all nations to be ambitious going forward, and for all nations to fulfill the commitments that were made, particularly in terms of technology, finance, and a greater supportive role to make the world a safer place to live in.
We will take the final one.
Fas Shenoy, a local Italian media minister. Both India and Italy, the host, have very large small, medium and micro enterprises, and both the economies are very much based on these, especially family-owned companies, which have been hit the most by the pandemic. Is there anything specific that the G20 is doing about these companies and this kind of an economic setup?
Well, the G20 recognizes that the MSME sector, which is a very large employment creator in almost all countries, is a very, very crucial sector. It deserves particular attention, and broadly, almost all countries, as per the data available before us, have made specific provisions. India has been at the forefront of supporting our MSME sectors through several initiatives under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, and we continue to support our MSME sector towards a faster and more resilient recovery.
So let me end this then. Thank you very much, sir, for your presence here. Appreciate very candid conversation. To all of you joining in live as well as people here, we will try to bring you more information about Honorable Prime Minister's other engagements today during the day, later this afternoon. Stay tuned to this channel. Good evening. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Very special.